Hi everyone. Good evening. Hi Adam.
Hey, how's it going?
Great. Good to have you back with us this week. I am actually very much excited every week. So I think we can get started.
Yeah,
Um,
can I just say that you look amazing? And I hope no one can tell that I just got out of the shower like 2 minutes
yeah,
ago when I realized
yeah.
the
You
time.
can always say I look amazing. Thank you. All right. So I'm pretty excited about today's session because this topic is pretty, it's one of the basic topics. So if any of you had already been through a training with me, you probably know that, but it's very basic. However, I think in 15 minutes, you guys would know more about model lines and contour lines than what you thought there is to even know. So we're gonna dive deep into this fundamental topic, and we're gonna cover it, and it's gonna be great. So, Yotam, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm excited. If you guys, by the way, have any questions, that's why I'm here for. Wow, English. Yeah, sorry. The time. This is what I'm here for. Please ask away. Hi, Alex. Hi, Mauricio. And if you want to tell us where you're from and say hi in the chat, please go ahead. Nehama, I think we're ready when you are.
All right, so let's jump over to Revit. So basically today we're here to talk about model lines and how we use them in Revit. But when we're talking about model lines in Revit, at least when I talk about model lines in Revit, I'm actually talking about contour lines in Revit. And some of you maybe are landscape architects, but others are architects and BIM managers. And please excuse me, but I want to actually start by talking about contour lines a little bit, and then we're going to dive back into model lines and how we use them in Revit. So I know it looks like it's basic, but let's ask ourselves the question, what are contour lines essentially? We can see them all over this model over here, right? We can see the contour lines, but contour lines are not a physical thing. They're a concept, right? A concept that we use as representation. You can see them all over the ground over here. And if we open a typical landscape grading plan, you can see the contour lines here. So the best way I found of how to define that, and that's in a book by Professor Peter Paschek, and I'll show you that book in a second. The best way I found to describe what is contour lines is that this is a 2D representation of the three-dimensional shape of the land. That's the best way to describe contour lines. And this is exactly what they're doing over here in this plan. If we zoom a little bit in, you can see that each line has an elevation attached to it. And this is exactly what contour lines are doing. Um, and for those of you who want to dive a little bit deeper and understand landscape, I truly recommend, and this is not an advertise, it's just something that I personally recommend, taking a look at this book by Professor Peter Paschek, where he's talking about landscape architecture, how we represent it in 3D software, but also giving a little bit of the history and the background to understand. And over here, these are a bunch of some of my favorite, illustrations to really give you an understanding of what are contour lines and how they are working. So just imagine taking this 3D element that you see over here and dumping it into a tub of water, and then taking the water out, little by little, and just marking every centimeter, every meter, every few inches. I don't know where you guys from, but just marking on this 3D model. And if you look at it on a plan view, on a bird's eye view, that's the way these lines are going to show. So basically, if you go over these illustrations and understand them, Then you understand contour lines and you understand landscape design. I do have to say, just, to amuse you a little bit, that's the acceptable way of representing the landform. However, that's not the only way. If we go over here into Google Maps and we take a look at the map, we can really understand the landform. However, there are no contour lines over here. So if we kind of dive deep into the map, we can see that Google Maps are actually using shades in order to help us understand what is the three-dimensional shape of the land. And this is definitely something that you could do within Revit, but it's not accurate. It's more for the feeling of what is the structure of the land. But in Revit or in architectural plans, we're using contour lines. So, that's a very big topic. I'm not going to go any deeper than that. I just wanted to, kind of have the basic here understandable, or explain it. Forgive my English today. So we understood that we have contour lines, and pay attention, I'm in Revit 2023. Let's move to a different, view. Now, one of the great things that I love about Revit, and this is actually one of the things that made me fall in love with Revit, is how topographies behave in Revit. Now, this is 2023. In 2024, it's a little bit different. However, if you're using environment for Revit, you would not feel the difference. So let's, for example, go to the topography tools and, just create a basic topography over here. Let's go maybe this edge and this edge, just for the demonstration, right? You can already see the contour lines created on the surface. So this is one of my favorite things about Revit topographies. As a landscape architect, I can always see the contour lines. And not only that I can see the contour lines, but also if, for example, let's add a point over here. If I change anything, for example, let's add, 5 meters to the elevation of the point. Let's change the elevation of the points in 5 meters. Let's take it higher. You can immediately see the contour lines adjusting as this point is changing. Let's take it down 3 meters, right? So topographies immediately react to the changes we make to their form. However, you can see that contour lines are not used to shape these topographies. They're just used to represent. So how do we create topographies in Revit, or Toposolids for that matter? It's the same thing. We're creating them using points rather than contour lines. So as I told you before, these contour lines make me fall in love with Revit, but a lot of times as a landscape architect, you really need to design with these contour lines. And that brings me to the topic of model lines. So basically, we're going to talk today about model lines, and there are two main things that we're doing with model lines in Revit. The first thing is we're using them as design elements. And so we're using them as design elements, and we're using them for the modeling process. And we'll see that in a second. And the second thing that we're doing with model lines, and I really hope I'll spell that right, because, oh my God, spelling is bad, in English for me. So the second thing we're doing with these model lines, we're using them for representation or documentation. So we're using them basically to show contours on slabs. And these are the two main things that we're going to see today how to do with these model lines. So let's start with the first thing. Let's start with, the design elements, understand how we can use these model lines for modeling. But before that, after we spoke about what are contour lines, now we have to talk a little bit about what are model lines, all right? And so again, this is very, very basic, but I'm using this platform to make sure that we're all, approaching this with the same common knowledge, right? So what is a model line? Basically, in Revit, there are two types of elements: model elements and view-specific elements. Model lines are lines that are three-dimensional. They are model elements. And for example, if I go to a 2D view and go to annotate detail line and just draw a line over here, it would look the same. When I'm drawing the line, it would look the same. I would have the same line styles available to me. However, I would not see that in 3D view. So just so you know, I can always select this line, and in the Modify tab, I can convert it into a model line. And then let's go to a 3D view. Now that it's a model line, I can see it in the 3D view as well. So how do we know if a certain line is a model line or a detail line? Well, that's easy. If I can see it on a 3D view, then I know this is a model line. But if for some reason you don't see it, or you need a different way to know, just select the line and take a look at the properties panel, and you'll see that it has a constraint. It has a level that it's attached to. And that's an indication for us that this is a three-dimensional element. All right, it's a 3D line, and this is why it has a certain elevation or a certain constraint that it's attached to. So now that oh, 1 second, I wrote to myself. So there's another thing that is really important about model lines, and I really like this behavior of the model lines, because every category in Revit behaves in a different way. So another thing that I really like about model lines is that they behave as a subcategory. What does it mean? Let's go to the visibility graphics overrides. And you can see that we have a category that is called lines. But if we open this plus sign, you'll see that every line style is basically its own subcategory, which means that we can hide or reveal certain line styles within our files. And for me, you can see that I always have a line style that I call helpline. And that brings us to the next topic. So I'm going to show you how I use model lines as design elements. And once I'm done using them, I can simply hide them in the view using the visibility graphics, the visibility graphic override. Sorry, there is a construction line style over here, and you can see that they're gone in the view, right? So now I can pick and select which model lines I want to show and which model lines I don't want to show in the view. And that's a really great thing about model lines. So two ways to hide them: through the visibility graphics override or through the hide in view by category. It's very basic, very easy. And now let's see how we use them. So basically what we're doing, and now I'm going to move to Revit 2024. I'm using model lines to reverse engineer topographies. So we saw before that we're using topographies point by point, but now what I'm going to do is reverse engineer this process, and I'm going to use these model lines as they're already contour lines, and then I will place the elevation points on top of them to create the topography. So let's see how it works. I have a bunch of model lines over here, just red model lines, and you can see that when I draw model lines, they will always be flat. So the first thing I want to do if I want them to behave as contour lines is I want them to have an elevation, right? So that's where I'm going to use the model line settings over here, the set elevation tool over here. So with the set elevation tool, I just have to say what is the first elevation that I want to set to my lines, and then what is the increment, right? What is the increment? What is the vertical distance between each and every line? So for example, the first line is going to change to 4-meter elevation, and the second is going to be 5, then 6, then 7, then 8. So if you learn how to count, that should be fairly easy. Now, there are a few ways that you can set elevation. I'm not going to go too deep into that. We have, a user guide for that. It's very easy. So I'm just going to use the by crossing option. And once I'm in the set elevation by crossing by environment, I can click one time over here and second time over here. And you can see in my 3D view that all the lines now have an elevation. Also, take a look at this tiny arrow over here. This is the model line setting. So if you don't like, the text symbols over here, you can uncheck them. If you don't like the color override of the lines, you can change that. So just to know that this is here. If you guys are landscape architects or site designers, you can already recognize that this shape that I drew over here with my model line, that's a shape of a river or a drainage, channel in landscape in a mountain. That's what rivers usually look like when we apply them, when we create them through contour lines. So that's kind of the shape that I was going for. Sorry, let's move to 3D view. And when we look at these lines on a 3D view, it's almost as if we can already imagine the shape that they're taking. So now that we have the lines, as I said before, topographies, Toposolid or Toposurface in Revit just work by points. So what we want to do now, in order to turn this into a topography, is to just place points on this line. Let's go to Topography Tools, and we're going to use the Add Line tool. So if you were with me in the past few sessions, you know that the topography tools are basically giving us strategies on how to place the points on the topography without calculating each and every point. So let's use the Add Line. And I'm just going to window select all these lines, and you can already see the elevation points being created on these lines. We have here, if we take a look at the topography tools window, we have here an indication of how many points we're going to have here and how many lines are selected. Now, the points that are added automatically through the smart point option over here, that's kind of environment trying to optimize the amount of points so you will get the smoothest shape with the least amount of points. However, you can always use the custom settings and get less points, but beware, this will be less accurate. So you have a lot of control over how exactly you're placing the points. But for me, I just want to use the smart point option over here. And going to the main properties menu, oh yes, insert highlighted points, of course. And remember, this is Revit 2024, so we always have the option to go to the main properties menu and define what we want this Toposolid to be. So I actually want to use maybe the green paving, gardening and soil paving. Let's click on apply and click on finish. And you can see that in this view, I actually had the shading open, so it will be even more obvious what is kind of the shape that we got here. And again, if you were with me in the last session, you can understand why these things occur. And that's just for lack of enough points. So let's move to a plan view. Again, you can see the three-dimensional representation of this shape. Let's go to topography tools. And there are a few ways in which we can really control this. One of them is to use the insert midpoint. It's not necessarily going to give me the most accurate result. And it really depends on how accurate do I want to be. So maybe in these specific areas, I would actually add a few model lines, or maybe I would just use the insert midpoint tool, which if you didn't see me using the past few sessions, then you're welcome to go back and use them. All right, so it's kind of refining, my topography to get a better view of what I want my shape to be, and then of course, and then the last thing I want to show you is how to use the slope arrows. That's landscape 101. Now you can understand where the water will go, because the water will always go perpendicular to the contour lines. So just placing this slope arrow can really show me how my river is working. Again, the water will always go to the center and to the middle over here. So that's one thing that we could do with these model lines. Let's go back to Revit 2023. And I want to go back again to this huge model over here. If I will go to the visibility graphics of this model, go to the line category, open it, and turn on some, and you can see that I have more than a few help line styles in this one, and I'm just going to turn it on. Then you can definitely see kind of the behind the scenes of how I created some of these topographies. And again, not all of them. There are a few methods, but I really used model lines as anchors here to be very specific and very accurate with my design. And I needed it in specific points, specific areas, more than other areas. So for every area, I really knew if I needed the contour lines or not. All right, so one last thing, with the design element, one last, example of how we can use these model lines to really design our topographies is this tiny little tool that I'm going to show you over here. And this one is pretty cool. So before we saw how we take a model line and we set an elevation to it, now we can see how we can just immediately create a model line in a specific elevation. So that's the Snap Workplane tool. You can see that I have this black dot, and as I'm snapping to, any plane, any 3D edge in my model, even if it's a linked element, you can see that I can get this work plane. And this work plane is a really good way to understand what a contour line is, right? Everything that is under the work plane is going to be under my line, and everything that's above the work plane is going to be above my line. So as I create the work plane, I have the modify place line options, and I can simply maybe take a spline, define the line style, and I can simply go ahead and draw a model line. And the model line will be at the same elevation of the work plane, which is at the same elevation that I clicked on. So let me click on Escape once, and I'm going back to the Snap Workplane tool, and let's show it again. So I want to create a contour line that's in this elevation. I'm going to click once. Now I have my work plane. I can use whatever line I want, whatever line style I want. I want to do it with a spline. Let's go 1, 2, 3, and 4. Click Escape once, and I'm out of the tool. So if I'll click Escape again to go out of the tool, you will be able to, again, see how these model lines are creating something that really looks three-dimensional. So now all I have to do is, again, go to Topography Tools. And again, this is Revit 2023. You can see that we hardly see the difference between Revit 2023 and 2024. We select the lines, click on Add Lines. Now maybe complete it with the From Edge tool a little bit to, just touch the edges, insert points, and click on Finish. So now, after we saw how these model lines can be design elements, let's take a look at the second part that we were talking about, which is representation, right? So we saw before that topographies has contour lines, and Toposolids in Revit 2024 has contour lines, which make for a very easy representation. But let's take a look at this grading plan again. Some elements here are simply, slabs. This is a floor. But to create the landscape document, I need to show contour lines on floors as well. And for that, we are using model lines as well. So before I go to show you the tool, I want to show you in my manage line styles that I always have an additional line style to create contour lines, primary and secondary. So I have a line style that is dedicated to that. And now I'm going to use the model lines as my contour lines on topographies. Just like you can see on this floor over here. And on a plan view, you can see that we have this floor with contour lines and contour labels. So let's see exactly how to do that. Let's say I want to show it on this floor. So I'm just going to go to environment and use the slab contours tool over here. Click on the slab contours tool, select this floor, click on finish, and the line style that I can choose any line style from my file. I'm just going to go with contour lines. And the increment, the contour increment, again, that's the distance between the different lines. Do I want to see a line every 10 centimeters, 20 centimeters? It just depends on your local standards. Let's click on OK now. And basically, these contour lines that you see over here, they are just regular model lines that are created automatically. And using this, check elevation feature over here, you can actually tag them either one by one. Let's click again to flip it, or by crossing. And the nice thing about these elements is that if I change the elevation of this floor, it will behave like, a topography. So if I change the elevation of this floor, let's say I'll place it on 9.5. Environment will ask me if I want to update the slab contours, and I'm going to say yes. And you can see that the slab contours and the contour labels have changed. Maybe here I have to re-add them because maybe the line didn't cover them. Sometimes the crossing line is not covering them. And again, if I need to flip it over, I can just go to the check elevation tool again and click on the same text label, and it will flip. So again, since these are model lines, I can see them in 3D. So I will have my contour lines available at every view. I think I pretty much covered the entire topic that I wanted to for today. Yotam, are you still with me?
Yeah, no, that was great. I actually, there's a couple people with a couple of questions. First thing Thomas said, and he's right, the best way is before the previous subject that you touched. Once you hover on just every element in Revit, including model lines or contour lines or any other element, floors, topographies, there will be a tooltip just once you hover that will tell you if it's actually a model line or not. So that would be also a good way to know what you're dealing with as far as the element. He actually said that he actually has some experience with Snap to Workplane tool.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Sorry. So he actually said that he had some experience with the Snap to Workplane tool. and he wanted to see how would you add it to model lines. So not creating new lines using the snap to work plane, but editing existing lines.
Again, sorry, I didn't hear the question so well. So how would I edit a topography that is created from model lines?
No, using the work plane, snap to work plane tool, how would you edit existing model lines?
All
Creating new
right.
model lines is
So let's take a look at an example. So let's say, for example, that I want to. All right. Let's say. Let's say that these model lines didn't exist, and I have this topography, and I want to
wait,
change the way this
you
model
need to
line
share your
is.
screen, first of
All
all.
right. You are
Also,
correct.
and
So
like
let's
you
say
can
that
also
I have this topography, and I want to change the way this model line or this contour line, I'm sorry, looks. And I don't have a model line yet. I just have the topography. So the first thing you have to do to change something is to delete any points that would be in my way before I even do something. If I know that I want to change this area, then I have to delete these points, because any extra points I'll add here would just be, extra. Would just, disturb the entire shape. So there are a few ways of, deleting points in a specific area. But with the topography tools, you have the draw selection region option, which is really convenient. So I can easily say, all right, I just want to edit this entire area of my topography. I just want to make it different. So I'm going to click, draw this thing, apply selection region. And in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and delete these points. So once I'm prepared and I already deleted these points, I can add something new over here. And that's the same workflow again. I'm just going to go to snap work plane, click, maybe, all right, I want to take it higher. So I'm going to click here, right? And I'm going to use a different line style now. And now all I have to do is to simply create the new design. And by the way, I always like to do it, a lot of times I like to do it on a plan view. It gives me a lot more control, so I can really see what I want, my contour line to look like. Let's click on escape again. Then simply going back to my topography, go into topography tools, add line, selecting this line, and adding it. By the way, another way of selecting just a line of points. So let's say I already created that, but then I want to add it just, the elevation of this line. If I click on escape and go back to the selection mode in the topography tools, I can also, click on one point and then get connected points. Oh, sorry. For some reason it doesn't work. Let's try that again. Right. And here, yeah. All right, so the get connected points tool just selects all the points in the same elevation. So now I could just say, all right, I just want to take it 10 centimeters lower. And then I'm actually editing a bunch of points, but I'm actually editing a line. So, and you can see that it didn't choose a bunch of them. So if I want, I could just use the control key and add them to my selection and just go do it again. Change elevation. So I'm really changing the contour line here. Just go again, change elevation. So again, it depends on what you need to do, but the basics would be to just, oh, sorry, I didn't apply the changes. The basics would be to just delete the area that you want to modify and then start to play around with it and edit, add your points, edit your lines. That would be the thing. I hope that's a good answer.
yeah, no, I think it was. There are a couple of questions, guys, that they're great questions. For example, JLR asked, how do I split a topo surface in Revit 2024, which is technically a topo solid. Topo surface is
Oh, I
kind of
love this
similar.
question. First of all,
I
I hate
know.
That's a
However,
great question.
also Walter asked, how do I can you edit from Civil 3D surface which is imported into Revit environment? Now, both of those questions are great. They're kind of not quite related to the to today's topic.
Right.
So Nechama, it's really if you just wanna like go ahead and you know splurge, feel free. Brian, by the way, asked he's curious how would you change or how would you update your topo surface in your larger model that you presented earlier based on the newer tool? So how would you update it to a Toposolid? That's another question. Again, kind of related, kind of not. I'm going to give you the.
Yeah, so all these questions are really, really good. First, I have to answer how do I split a surface because
Okay, yeah, because it's a fun one.
I really like this feature. So
Yeah.
in Revit 2024, how do you split a surface? You go to modify and then you go to split element, select the topo surface. And then you just go like whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And then you split it. Which is, I think, one of the great, things about Revit 2024. And that's
Yeah.
why I had to answer this question because I love this feature so much. I really needed it, all my life, and now it's here. So yeah, I'm answering it. About the Civil 3D question, I would like to do a whole session about that one because it's really Civil 3D and Revit. It's a whole topic. So let's do a session about this one.
Okay.
Can you edit from Civil 3D? Alex is asking, the downside with splitting in 2024 is that sometimes it'll end up with missing points and create holes. So that's true, Alex. And whenever you're kind of splitting stuff up in Revit, even before 2024, Revit kind of have to, let me just go with the preview points over here. So Revit
You can,
has to
yeah,
complete the
first of all, share your
geometry
screen.
and add points in
Um,
order to give you.
Wait, Nechama, share your screen again.
Yeah, it's always, I'm doing the same thing. So
No, it's okay.
Revit has to kind of add the points over here to give you an overview of, to kind of complete the geometry. So that's true. That's a good note. So if you're doing edits, if you're editing anything, you should know that it might affect how the geometry would look like, and that's just something to be aware of. There was another question, Yotam, you asked about how to modify a big surface.
So Brian asked that you showed the large scale kind of complex, and he asked, how would you? Let me just scroll up real quick. Yes, I'm curious on how Nechama would change how she would update her topo surface in the larger model based on the newer tools. I didn't stutter. He just like wrote it quick. Thanks, Brian. It's a good question.
That's a
I
good
think
question.
yeah.
I mean, I think just the same way as I showed before. But I would the question has to be more specific. So Brian, um, I'll invite you to the show one of the next times, and then you could just like bring your own challenge, and we'll break it down and solve it together.
Yeah. And
Um,
there's no more questions. I'm just gonna say, by the way, with the add lines feature, you're not actually creating contour lines. The contour lines are it's basically your depends on your Revit settings, but you're adding more lines and more elevation points into your topography. So technically, you can also just add, for example, 3, 4, 5 lines, and you'll end up with 50 contour lines if the topography is actually really steep.
Yeah,
Could
that's
be
a
the
good
opposite.
note. That's a good note that you're saying there. I could just have a model line here and a model line here, and this could be in elevation 1,
Yeah,
and the other one could be in elevation 30. And
yeah.
when I go and create a topography from all of them. And again, let's do the insert midpoint to just make it a little bit smoother. But these are just, you know, handles, design elements as to where, like, edges that I can create elevation points on top of. And that's another thing that you can see over here. So for example, this entire pathway was designed with two edges. I had this model line and this edge, but still I got a lot of contour lines in the way. So you don't always have to create every contour line. It just depends on how accurate and how complex your design. And I think that, again, as you do, you try the tools, as you use them more and more, you get more savvy, and you get your own, you know, way of doing stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Was a good session, a little bit long, but hope you guys had patience to all of this.
Eric, your session in Autodesk 2022 is great, and it covers a lot of those topics. So I'm actually gonna, at the end of this video, I'm gonna attach a link to Nehama's class.
In the description of the video, maybe, or something like that. Yeah.
Exactly. And yeah, thanks guys. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Nehama. You did great.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks, Walter.
Bye.
Bye, Thomas. Bye, Brian. Thank you, Eric.